It was a cold morning when the bull stood in the center of the dusty auction yard. His once proud figure now seemed small and defeated. The crowd gathered round, murmuring and whispering. Most of them didn't care to look too closely at him. He wasn't the kind of animal anyone would want, at least not anymore. His body had grown weak, his movements slower. But what no one knew was that this bull, once the pride of the farm, held a secret, a hidden strength waiting to be discovered. His name was Rock, and for many years, he had been the centerpiece of a thriving farm, admired by everyone who saw him. Rock had been strong, reliable, and had earned the respect of everyone around him. He had once led the other animals through thick and thin, standing tall in the middle of the herd, his muscles rippling under the sun. But things had changed. A simple misstep had led to an injury, and over time, he had grown weaker. It wasn't that he had lost his spirit, but the people who had once depended on him couldn't see beyond the scar on his leg. They saw him as useless now, and so Rock was put up for sale. But what really stung was that no one even wanted to bid on him. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the yard, calling for offers, but there was nothing but silence. The crowd watched him with disinterest, almost as if he didn't matter anymore. A low bid was called. $1, just $1. The farmer who had raised him, a man named Jim, stood by helplessly. He looked down at the bull he had spent so many years with. Jim had always known Rock as more than just a farm animal. They had shared countless hours together, working side by side, facing the daily challenges of the farm. Jim had grown attached to him, and seeing him being sold for the price of a bottle of water broke his heart. But there was nothing he could do. He was struggling too. His farm was failing, and debts had piled up. Jim didn't want to let go, but it was either sell the bull or lose everything. As the bull was led away to his new owner, Jim couldn't help but feel like he had failed him. The decision to sell was one of the hardest he had ever made, but it was necessary. At least that's what he told himself. Rock was no longer the bull he once was, and maybe it was time to move on. The new owner, a quiet man named Mark, didn't look like someone who would understand the bull's true worth. To Mark, Rock was just another animal to add to his small farm. He didn't have the same bond that Jim had, nor did he seem to care much. Rock was weak, damaged, only worth $1. Mark led the bull into a small, overcrowded pen with a few other animals. The other animals ignored him, giving him only the occasional glance. Rock stood in the corner, his eyes distant. He had been through so much, but he still held a part of his strength deep inside, a strength no one had yet seen. He had been thrown away, sold like trash, but he wasn't broken yet. He still had something to prove, not just to others, but to himself. Mark wasn't bothered by the bull's quietness. He just needed Rock to eat, to stand, to stay alive. There was no expectation of greatness. No one expected anything from him anymore. But the thing about Rock was, he was not ready to give up. He didn't know how, but he felt something stir. Inside of him, it wasn't just the cold wind or the pain in his leg, it was something more. A feeling that he wasn't done yet. No one knew it, but there was more to this bull than what the world had seen. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't finished. Maybe the $1 they'd sold him for wasn't the real price of his worth. The days passed, and still, nothing changed for Rock. He spent most of his time alone in the pen, his once powerful frame now resting against the wooden bars. Mark barely noticed him. To the farmer, Rock was just another animal, waiting to be sold, or used for whatever small tasks he could manage. But one afternoon, something shifted. Mark was out in the field, working on the fence, when he heard a strange sound coming from the pen. It wasn't a normal noise, nothing like the usual lowing of cows or the squawking of chickens. It was sharp, almost like a grunt, but with a rhythm to it. Curious, Mark wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked over to the pen. There, in the corner, was Rock. The bull was pacing back and forth, his head held higher than usual, his eyes focused on something in the distance. Mark couldn't help but watch. There was something about the bull that was different today's, something more determined. Without thinking, Mark opened the gate and stepped inside. At first, Rock didn't move, but then, as if recognizing the presence of his new owner, he began to shift his weight. He stood tall, the muscles in his legs twitching. Then, unexpectedly, Rock took a step forward and broke into a light run, his hooves hitting the ground in a steady rhythm. Mark stood frozen, watching as the bull's movements became smoother, faster, and more graceful with each step. The speed at which Rock moved shocked Mark. The bull was running, like he hadn't in months. His legs were no longer stiff from the injury. His body flowed with a power that seemed to come from deep inside him. For a brief moment, Mark thought he saw something else in Rock's eyes: pride, strength, and perhaps a hint of defiance. Rock ran the length of the pen and then stopped, looking back at Mark, as if daring him to follow. Mark hesitated, but then decided to try something. He reached for a simple rope and began to walk alongside the bull. To his surprise, Rock followed, matching his steps, walking with him, as though he had been trained to do so. Mark took a deep breath. He had seen a glimpse of something in Rucka. Potential. A skill he hadn't realized was there before. That night, Mark thought long and hard. The bull was not the useless animal he had assumed him to be. In fact, Rock seemed more capable than he had imagined. The injury that had slowed him down was still there, but it didn't seem to matter anymore. There was power in him still, hidden behind the layers of rejection and the mistreatment of his past life. The next day, Mark decided to test Rock further. He took him to the small, rickety training area behind his barn. It was far from a proper ring or arena, but it was all he had. Mark walked to the center, gave a simple command, and hoped for the best. To his amazement, Rock obeyed. With a quick movement, Rock jumped over a low fence, clearing it with ease. Mark stood still for a second, his heart racing. Had he just seen what he thought he saw? The bull's agility was nothing short of incredible. Mark repeated the exercise, and again, Rock jumped. This time, higher. His powerful legs lifted him effortlessly, almost as if he had been practicing his whole life. The beauty of it was in the fluidity, in the way Rock moved. There was grace in him, grace that only a few animals were capable of showing. For the first time since Mark had bought him, he felt something stirring inside. This bull was no ordinary animal. He had something special, a gift that no one had recognized. But the world had written him off. The same world that had sold him for just $1. What a mistake that had been. Mark stood there, staring at the bull as he took a few more strides around the area, his hooves tapping the ground with a rhythmic echo. It was as if Rock was testing himself, feeling his strength come back, piece by piece. There was no denying it. Now Rock was not just a bull, he was something else. Something rare. The days that followed were unlike anything Mark had ever experienced. Every morning, after a long day's work on the farm, Mark would return to the small training area behind the barn. He began to work with Rock, pushing him further each time. It wasn't easy sometimes. Rock seemed to doubt himself, slowing down or resisting. But Mark didn't give up. There was something in the bull's eyes, a flicker of defiance, a hunger for something more. He could see each Rock wanted to prove that he wasn't finished. Over time, Rock grew stronger. His body began to look healthier, more robust. His steps became more confident, and with each training session, his movements grew smoother and more controlled. Mark couldn't believe what he was seeing. This was the same bull that had been discarded for a single $1, the same one people had laughed at. But now, he was transforming before Mark's eyes into something powerful, something no one had ever expected. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Mark had an idea. A local festival was coming up, and with it, a yearly competition, a test of strength and skill for the farm animals. It was the kind of event where the strongest and fastest animals showed off their abilities. The winner would gain respect and recognition, something every farm animal craved. Mark's heart raced as he watched Rock practicing on the makeshift course. He could see it now, the strength, the agility, the sheer determination. He had to enter Rock into the competition. But there was a catch. This was a serious event, filled with animals that were strong, young, and healthy. No one would expect much from a bull like Rock, especially one that had been sold for $1. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that this was Rock's moment. This was his chance to show the world what he was capable of. The day of the festival arrived, and the small town square was filled with people, stalls, games, and laughter filled the air. But Mark wasn't here for the festivities. He had come for one reason. He was about to enter Rock into the competition. He could feel the skepticism in the air, the doubting glances that people shot in his direction. Rock wasn't exactly the picture of health or strength compared to the other animals. But Mark didn't care. This wasn't about winning. This was about proving that Rock was more than just a forgotten animal. When it was their turn, Mark led Rock to the starting line. The crowd watched quietly. Some people whispered, others snickered. There were few polite smiles, but no one expected anything from the old bull. Mark stood next to him, trying to hide the nervousness in his chest. The competition began. The other animals raced through the course with speed and power, and for a moment, Mark felt like they might be out of their league. But then, it was Rock's turn. The bull took a deep breath, his eyes focused ahead. The first obstacle was a series of hurdles. As the signal went off, Rock moved, almost too slowly at first. But then, something changed. He picked up speed, his legs pushing against the ground with more power than anyone had expected. As he neared the first hurdle, he leapt on over it, but through it, clearing it in one smooth motion. The crowd gasped. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected Rock to jump that high, that effortlessly. The bull landed on the other side and didn't slow down. He continued running, faster now, with confidence, his muscles working together in a way that seemed almost calculated. The second hurdle came, and again, Rock jumped, this time even higher, clearing it with ease. Crowd began to react. There was an excited murmur, a shift in energy. No one had expected this. A bull, who had once been considered too old and weak, was now showing skills that no one thought were possible. Rock's body moved like a well-oiled machine. He wasn't just competing, he was dominating. Each jump, each turn, was smoother than the last. The energy in the air changed from doubt to awe as Rock reached the final obstacle. A steep climb up a slippery ramp. Mark held his breath. This was the last test. If he could clear this, they would win. He watched as Rock approached the ramp, and with a single powerful push, the bull surged upward, his hooves gripping the surface with a strength that Mark couldn't believe. The bull reached the top, pausing for a moment, his chest heaving. The crowd was silent, watching, waiting. Then, with one last step, Rock was at the top. The crowd erupted. Cheers and claps filled the air, louder than anything Mark had ever heard. The once dismissed bull, the one who had been sold for $1, had just won the competition. He had proven them all wrong. In that moment, Mark felt a rush of emotions, pride, gratitude, and disbelief. Rock had done it. He had become a champion, and not just in the eyes of the crowd, but in his own heart. As they stood together, surrounded by applause, Mark looked down at the bull. He had been wrong about Rock. The world had been wrong about him. No amount of rejection could take away what was inside. And for the first time, Mark understood that sometimes, the greatest strength isn't always visible at first. It's hidden, waiting for the right moment to show itself. The celebration that followed was overwhelming. The crowd had gathered around Mark and Rock, cheering and clapping, their faces full of astonishment. The bull, once thought of as nothing more than a burden, stood there with his head held high, his muscles rippling under the fading sunlight. It was as if a transformation had taken place, not just in his body, but in the way the world now saw him. Mark stood next to Rock, still in a daze. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He'd entered the competition on a whim, not expecting much, but Rock had proved everyone wrong. The bull had shown the world that he wasn't just some injured animal to be tossed aside. He was a force to be reckoned with, a champion in his own right. As the day wore on, Mark noticed something different about the way people looked at him and the bull. There was respect in their eyes now. People who had once laughed at the idea of a bull like Rock even being part of the competition were now coming up to congratulate him. One by one, they patted Rock on the back, their faces filled with admiration. It was a moment of validation, not just for the bull, but for Mark as well. For Mark, this victory meant more than just a blue ribbon. It was a reminder that sometimes, the world judges too quickly. People had seen Rock as broken, useless, and discarded, but they didn't know his story. They didn't know the strength that lay beneath the surface, hidden away, waiting for the right time to emerge. Later that evening, as Mark led Rock back to the pen, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He looked at the bull, whose coat now shimmered under the stars. Rock had come so far, and in doing so, he had taught Mark a lesson he would never forget. There was a quiet strength in not giving up, in holding on to hope, even when the world seemed to have written you off. Mark spoke softly to Rock, as he stroked his neck, a smile playing on his lips. "You did it, old friend, we both did." Rock snorted softly, as if in agreement, his eyes calm but filled with an unspoken understanding. It was clear that the bond between them had deepened in ways that couldn't be put into words. The next morning, the sun rose to find a new chapter beginning for both of them. The farm was still struggling, but things were different now. People who had once doubted Mark's choices were beginning to look at him differently, too. Word had spread about the amazing bull who had won the competition, and Mark could feel the change. Doors were opening, opportunities to expand the farm, to sell the animals at a better price, and maybe even to turn things around. But beyond all that, there was something else that had changed. Mark had learned that real strength isn't about looking perfect or meeting the world's expectations. Real strength is about what you have inside, even when no one is looking. It's about standing tall, even when the world tries to knock you down, and Rock had shown him that. As for Rock, the world now saw him for what he truly was, champion. His worth wasn't defined by a price tag, a past mistake, or an injury. His worth was defined by his spirit, his resilience, and his ability to rise above everything that had tried to break him. In the end, Rock's journey wasn't just about winning a competition. It was about proving that you can overcome anything, even when everyone doubts you. And in doing so, you just might change the lives of the people who believed in you all along. Mark looked over at Rock one last time before they went inside the barn for the night. The bull stood proudly in the center of the pen, his head high, his eyes shining with the light of someone who had truly found his place in the world. It had been a long road to get here, but in the end, Rock had not only redeemed himself, he had proven that no one and nothing should ever be counted out.